In this video, I'm going to show you all the little tricks that I use to make the crispiest takeout style General Tso's chicken at home. This chicken is pretty much perfect, I think. The breading stays totally stuck onto the chicken. It's insanely crunchy. The chicken itself is super tender and the sauce is fresh, bright, flavorful, and the perfect level of sticky sweet. To get started, I'll grab 1 pound or 2 medium chicken breasts. Thighs would also work, but with the process that I'm using, the extra fat and resilience to high heat cooking that thighs offer just isn't as important as it is in most other dishes. Breasts are a little bit easier to cut into clean, even pieces, and I don't know why, but in my experience, breast meat holds onto its breading a little bit better than thighs. Now to prep these breasts, I'll grab a jacquarding tool and punch them about 10 times on each side. If you don't know, a jacquard is a tool with rows of tiny blades that pierce meat to physically break down its muscle fibers. That not only makes the chicken more tender and more pleasant to chew, but it also reduces how much the meat contracts under high heat, meaning it squeezes out less juice and stays noticeably moister. Also, if no jacquard, just pierce your breast with a sharp fork about 20 to 30 times per side. Next, I'll slice each breast into 3 or 4 long strips top to bottom. Then I'll cut those strips down into cubes that are about 3/4 of an inch. I want these on the small side because the chicken is gonna grow by at least 50% by the end of this process, and if the pieces are too big, they'll have less surface area for holding on to crispy breading. Once the chicken's cut up, I'll scoot it into a medium bowl, then add in 30 grams of soy sauce, 30 grams of mirin, 2 grams of MSG, 2 grams of baking soda, and 30 grams of potato starch, or cornstarch would also work. Then from here, I'm gonna jump into the bowl and mix the marinade and chicken together until everything is combined. By the way, the baking soda in this marinade is a trick that Chinese restaurants use to raise the meat's pH. This inhibits the proteins from bonding during cooking, which makes lean cuts like breast much more tender and juicy. Once everything's combined, I'll set it aside to marinate for 20 minutes while I put together the breading. For that, into a medium bowl, I'll combine 350 grams of all-purpose flour, 10 grams of baking powder, 8 grams of garlic powder, 20 grams of salt, and then 350 grams of potato starch. Potato starch is my secret weapon for Asian-style fried chicken because it fries up ultra crispy, it absorbs less oil than cornstarch or all-purpose flour, and it browns really slowly, giving the coating more time to dehydrate, which leads to maximum crispiness. Once the dry mix is pulled together, I'm gonna throw an empty bowl onto a scale and measure in 250 grams. Then I'll tear out the scale and add in 300 grams of water to make a batter. This is a trick that I came up when developing my Korean fried chicken recipe, and basically this batter is going to act as a base layer that keeps this breading super glued to the meat. Okay, once the water stirred in, I've got a batter that looks like thin pancake. So next I'll measure 200 grams of this batter into the rest of my dry mix, and then I'll whisk that briefly to combine, and once it is a little bit hydrated, I'll come back and use my hands to crumble this stuff into tons of small craggy bits. You guys, these little crags are the whole ball game when it comes to crispiness. Just dusting meat in flour isn't enough to make it crunch. That flour is going to eventually absorb the cooking juices and all of the steam that comes off the meat after it's fried, and then it's going to get soft. These little clods of starch, on the other hand, get so dehydrated during the fry that they hold on to their texture even in the face of chicken steam or sauce. The final texture here should have a mixture of powdery background substrate that is full of thousands of tiny little partially hydrated pebbles. Okay, let's get back to the breast meat. After a quick 20-minute marination, these are seasoned up and the protein is a little bit denatured from the soda, so they're ready to bread. I'll start that process by flipping about 1/3 of this chicken into my batter bowl, then I'll stir those around to get them evenly coated. But I'm being a little bit gentle here so that I don't stir away the marinade clinging to the outside. Once these are battered up, I'm gonna carefully lift them out, drain them off a little bit, then move them over to my bowl of crags. From here, I'm gonna tumble them without touching them directly. For that, I like to lift from the bottom and fluff. This helps get a strong base layer of starch stuck onto the batter and keeps me from fussing with the meat too much, which ends up pulling the breading right off. And once I got a strong base layer of flour stuck to the chicken, I'm gonna come back and grab each piece and then shower it with fresh craggy bits while giving it a soft squeeze with my other hand and passing it back and forth to shake off anything excessive. And once I've got all my chicken chunks run through the batter and the dry mix, I'll move this tray over to the fridge to hang for 20 more minutes. This is gonna hydrate a little bit of the flour that's directly touching the chicken, and that's going to up breading adhesion by about 30 to 50%. While that sits, I'm gonna bust out the sticky General Tso sauce. But first, I wanna thank Trade Coffee for sponsoring this vid. I just figured something out. Cold coffee is sick, especially when it's 98 degrees out every single day during the summer in St. Louis.
Why do I live here, dude? It's so fucking hot.
At this point, if you haven't heard of them, Trade is an online coffee subscription service that sources the best beans from the top roasters across the US, and now they have a special cold cold brew collection. The thing that I love about Trade's cold brew is that the beans are roasted specifically for the cold brew process. To make it, I just take the fresh roasted beans, throw them in a cold brew pitcher with some water, and then the whole thing goes into the fridge overnight. And that's it. Now I've got a delicious, smooth, refreshing cold brew that tastes like it came from a fancy coffee shop where all the baristas have septum piercings. Right now, for a limited time, Trade is going to give you guys 50% off a whole month of cold brew. That's around 60 cups of cold brew for 50% off when you go to drinktrade.com/Brian. If you like the drug caffeine, man, cold brew's got a lot of it. Again, that's drinktrade.com/Brian to get 50% off a month of cold brew. To make the General Tso sauce, I'm going to combine 60 grams of soy sauce, 30 grams of sesame oil, 60 grams of mirin, 45 grams of rice vinegar, 30 grams of sambal, or sriracha would work in a pinch, then 20 grams of ketchup, 70 grams of sugar, 10 grams of brown sugar, 10 grams of cornstarch, and 1 grams of MSG. From here, I'll just stir to dissolve the sugar and cornstarch into the mixture. Then I'm gonna cut some stuff. Next, I'll thinly slice about 40 to 50 grams of scallions. I'll save the green part for the garnish later on and mostly cut through the whites. By the way, the knife that I'm using to cut these is my knife, the Lagerstrom 8-inch chef's knife. It's super durable, it's very comfortable to use, and it costs just 40 bucks. It's a great knife, and I designed it myself from scratch. If you're interested in buying it, I'll throw a link down in the description. Finally, I'll grab 5 cloves of garlic and a knob of unpeeled ginger and grate them into a pulp on my microplane. Of course, if you don't have a microplane, just chop these down as small as you can with a knife, or buy the tubed paste stuff. I've been on a real kick with those lately, and I'm not ashamed of it. In total, I'll need 20 grams of ginger and 20 grams of garlic. Now to fry off this chicken, I'm gonna pour in a hefty amount of high smoke point oil into my Dutch oven. I'm using peanut oil, don't tell RFK, and this is roughly a 7-quart pot that I'm filling about 1.5 to 2 inches. Whatever vessel you use though, just make sure you're staying safe by never filling the pot more than halfway full. Back to the chicken. After about 20 minutes in the fridge, you can see that the breading has unified with the meat, and at this point, it's not going anywhere, except for in that hot oil. Over at the stove, I'm up to about 325F, so I'm gonna very carefully lower in this chicken with my spider and cook it in 2 batches so that the oil temperature doesn't drop too much and there's no risk of crowding or oil bubbling up and overflowing. Also, once the chicken is in, don't touch it for at least a minute. During this first phase of cooking, the breading is volatile because there's so much moisture being steamed off, and too much agitation here will loosen it up from the meat. After about 60 seconds though, it is advisable to come back and give these a little push and a pull with the spider just to make sure that they're not stuck to the bottom of the pot or to each other. Be gentle though, these things are still a little bit fragile. Now from here, I'm gonna let this fry untouched for another 6 to 7 minutes. And after about 7 to 8 total minutes of frying at 325F, these chicken nuggets are looking elite. From here, I'll move these over to a wire rack or a paper towel lined plate to drain off the excessive oil. Then I'll move back over to the stove and drop in the second batch of chicken chunks. And after another 6 to 7 minutes of cook time, I'm gonna pull the rest of my chicken chunks out of the oil. And yeah, guys, this stuff looks like Tyson chicken nuggets. That sounds like an insult, but it's actually exactly what I want. If the mega food corporations have ever nailed one thing, it's perfectly breaded fried chicken.
Oh my God, look at this. Wow, man. The crunch is just deep. By the 10th or 12th chew, it's still there. It's still unfolding. It's so satisfying.
Now, before I turn this into General Tso's, I'm going to very carefully move my oil pot out of the way, which I like to do by putting into an off oven. Then I'll grab my wok or a large nonstick pan and drop it over high heat. Once that's hot, in goes a long squeezer of high smoke point oil. Then I'll drop in my scallions and stir fry those for 60 seconds to soften them up and open up their flavor. This whole cooking process happens super fast, you guys, so you really need to make sure that you've got everything ready before you start putting things on the heat. Okay, once the scallions are cooked off, next I'll add in a handful of cracked, de-seeded arbol chilies and stir fry for about a minute or so to infuse the oil a bit, or to make it a bit spicy. That goes quick though. Next, I'm gonna add in all of my ginger and garlic, then stir fry that for, again, about 30 to 60 seconds, and you gotta keep this moving the entire time. Yeah, it's already taken on some color. So to stop that browning, I'm gonna add in my General Tso sauce by pouring it around the hot edge of the wok to catch a little bit of caramelization caramelization. Then I'll bring this sauce up to a simmer and boil it until it's thickened and reduced by about 15 to 20%. And once the sauce is leaving behind a nice trail like this, I'm gonna call it reduced enough, and then I'm gonna add in my fried chicken chunks. I'm still simmering this sauce though over high heat because I want to cook the chicken in the sauce for just a few seconds to soften it just a little bit. I know that seems crazy because this entire video thus far has been spent telling you how to edge towards max crispiness, but these chunks have crispiness to spare. This is gonna get a bunch of that sauce saturated into the breading, and you'll also get a bunch of different textures out of it. Some bits are gonna be a little bit sogged up, and others are gonna be perfectly crisp.
Oh my God, bro, that looks so nasty.
The whole thing just looks like you took a photo of Panda Express and hit enhance 10 times. It's like a 3D version of what you would get from the strip mall. It's so hyper.
Dude, it's just so crunchy and it just keeps going. By like the 20th chew, it's still there and it's still crispy and crunchy, and you're like, how is this even possible? And the sauce, guys, it's so perfectly sticky. It's savory, it's sweet. There's a little bit of noticeable ketchup in there, which is fun and familiar. And then there's this pungent, bright, fresh ginger flavor that kind of takes over, and that is really, really delicious. Overall, this is just so much better than anything you've ever had from a mall food court or a strip mall, that it becomes its own thing entirely. It's that much better. I know the whole process is a little bit cumbersome and a little bit time consuming, but what else are you doing? The next time you've got a couple hours on a Saturday, you should spend it doing this because the results are insane. You're gonna have a good time.
If you guys want another well-tested recipe for Chinese takeout food, I'm gonna link to another video where I do that right here. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.